ABC-7 Extra.
Good evening, I'm Saul Saenz, and this is ABC-7 Extra Sunday Edition. We appreciate you permitting us into your homes this evening to talk about something all of us had to endure this past year. It's hard to believe that just 1 year ago, this same weekend, El Paso City and County officials held a news conference to tell reporters El Paso had no cases of the novel coronavirus. This was the afternoon gathering, March 13th, 2021. You'll notice there was no social distancing and no one, not even health officials, were wearing masks. ABC-7 reported during our 5 and 6 p.m. newscast, El Paso had no known coronavirus cases. But that same evening, city and county officials called for another news conference, and the message changed drastically. El Paso reported its first case 1 year ago.
Since our press conference this afternoon announcing our emergency declaration, the judge and I have been informed that we have a presumptive positive here in El Paso.
It is very important that we remind the population or the public in general that this is not airborne, so it's not going to be out in the air. It has to be transmitted from person to person through infected secretions and being in contact with those.
That was on Friday. By the weekend, El Paso was reporting 2 coronavirus cases. El Paso then Health Director Robert Resendez told ABC-7 both cases were people who had traveled out of town. The virus was so new at the time, El Paso didn't even have a way to test for it.
We have some testing around the city that tests for different respiratory viruses. One of those respiratory viruses is a coronavirus. It's not the COVID-19. It's not that you were infected with a novel strain. So COVID-19 is very specific, and those instrumentations don't test for that.
The good thing about El Paso is we have not had any local transmission yet, so we can go about business as usual.
Health, city, and county officials were trying their best to avoid public hysteria, but what followed days after the announcement of those first cases triggered a buying spree.
Everybody is in a panic mode. They're running, trying to get toilet paper and the disinfectants. They're also, like fighting for, no, I got this. No, I got this. It's pretty sad.
The number of positive cases and deaths grew exponentially. Every week, ABC-7's Mauricio Casillas checked in with doctors on the front lines to see how the pandemic was evolving in the borderland. In the fall, a health crisis.
We have never seen anything like this before. Not in this town. We have never seen anything like this.
Hospitals became overwhelmed. Healthcare workers were working around the clock trying to treat COVID patients, sometimes even people they knew.
Having people who you know in a bed and you being the doctor, seeing their fear, knowing that these are the only hands and the nurses, that the only hands that they can grab, and you don't even know if that is the last time that they will grab somebody's hands. And it has to be you, it's not their loved ones. It's heartbreaking.
The medical examiner's office ran out of space and had to resort to mobile morgues and trailers parked outside to house victims of the sometimes fatal virus. County inmates were hired to move the bodies. The winter holidays came, and with them, fear of another spike.
We're hitting 90% probably of the capacity of those, and that's why we have the overflow, the tents, and everything else. What I'm saying is that we will adapt, and it changes every day. It changes from the morning to the afternoon. You'll see the number of people that leave the ICU or the ones that increase or leave. So it's a variable thing. The point is we're managing it.
Those bodies we just showed you, victims of this horrible virus, have since been moved to an undisclosed area. Now, joining us to talk about what we first believed the virus was, how our perception of the virus evolved, and the changes it took to get us to where we are now, is Dr. Armando Mesa, Chief of Infectious Diseases at Texas Tech Physicians of El Paso. And many of you recognize my next guest. Dr. Ogachika Lozi has been a frequent guest on ABC-7 Extra. I thank him for that. He, too, is an infectious disease expert and sits on the Governor's Task Force for Infectious Disease Preparedness. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for taking time to talk to us. I'll start with you, Dr. Mesa. Take me back a year ago. What were your thoughts about the disease then?
We were very concerned about the information that was coming from China about something new that we had never faced before. So it was sort of difficult to sort out at the beginning what we were dealing with. Information was not really very accurate in many ways. I remember that one of the first things I heard about it was that it was not transmissible from person to person. So I was like, okay, so, if this is the case, nothing is going to happen beyond a few cases here and there. And obviously that was not what actually occurred. So misinformation and lack of information were probably the most common things that I kind of noticed. And obviously that raised a lot of concern on my end.
Yeah. Dr. Alozzi, well, of course, I don't have to remind you what it is that you thought about it back then. I had you right here on this show on ABC-7 Extra. You want to remind our viewers what you thought about it back then?
That's the problem with going on TV, Saul, is that they can play things back and
We're
tell
slaves
you
to our words, yes.
I was planning to go to the Tokyo Olympics, and I think that's what we all felt. Like Dr. Mesa said, that's what the information we had. I think really quickly, though, it became apparent that not only was it airborne, but it was highly infectious, it was highly contagious, and in those that were susceptible, it could easily be fatal.
Yeah. Dr. Mesa, I also want to ask you, now that you know all this, or when is it that you realized that, of course, El Paso, because you're in El Paso, that we were in trouble?
Well, when we started seeing the first case in El Paso, and after, knowing that there were already some reports in the United States, you start to realize that things are not going to get any better. I remember telling my wife, because we were planning to do some things on the personal side, and she was asking me, should I wait a little longer before it gets better? I said, no, this is not going to get any better. This is going to get worse. So we started preparing, and I think that most of the hospitals started to look into very carefully that things were going to need a very careful planning. I don't think that anticipated the amount of resources that will be eventually needed to take care of this, but that was one of the things that I felt that we needed to do, and best we could, we handled it, and the history will tell us how well we did, but those were my initial thoughts back then.
Okay, Doctor, we're going to take a really quick break. This is ABC-7 Extra Sunday edition. When we come back, we'll take a look at what medical experts first believed the world was dealing with and how they had to modify their thinking. You're watching ABC-7 Extra Sunday edition, where news is first.
Can you cook up the barbecue bacon burger at home? Well, does your home have fresh chopped onions, pickles, smoked cheddar, Monterey Jack, bacon, tangy barbecue sauce, and orange and white stripes with the word Whataburger emblazoned out front? If so, then absolutely. Good thing there's the limited time barbecue bacon burger at Whataburger. Available by drive-thru, curbside, and delivery.
A spark of light can become a beacon of hope, just like your plasma. Donate your plasma to help save lives. When you give your light, it shines on all of us. Find a Griffel Center at grifflesplasma.com.
With steel, the great American outdoors are closer than you think. Our AK Homeowner Series starts at just $199.99. Pick up at over 10,000 local steel dealers. Real steel. Find yours.
Why am I so calm right now? Because this isn't a spy thriller. This is a Nissan sales event ad. Right on cue. This Rogue has more standard safety technologies than that RAV4. It's almost too easy.
Hurry in for a low $229 per month lease on the 2021 Rogue.
Tick-tock, time's running out.
You have a special light to give. Donate your plasma to brighten the lives of patients around the world, especially now. Give your light. Donate plasma. Find a Griffel Center at grifflesplasma.com.
Here's a startling number. COVID-19 has claimed at last count more than 2,200 El Pasoans. That's more lives than the number of El Pasoans who died in World War II and the Vietnam War combined. The World Health Organization alerted the world about the coronavirus, calling it a worldwide pandemic on January 31st, 2020. Still, some in the medical community believe journalists were blowing the virus out of proportion.
I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern over the global outbreak of novel coronavirus.
Now I also want to welcome back to ABC-7 Extra Dr. Armando Mesa, Chief of Infectious Diseases at Texas Tech Physicians of El Paso. And many of you may recognize my next guest, Dr. Ogachika Lozzi, also an infectious disease expert and sits on the governor's task force for infectious disease preparedness. Now, Dr. Mesa, it's kind of tough to say this, but when as an infectious disease expert, this was a unique opportunity for both of you to study something like a pandemic. What have you learned thus far, Dr. Mesa?
A lot of things. Multiple things were very highly educational. Although one of the things is how vulnerable we are to infections. I mean, for many, many years, and Dr. Lozzi probably will remember, there was in science a belief that we could fight infections permanently, that there will never be an issue with infections anymore because we have all the weapons. Well, that's been proven wrong multiple times. And this is one of the examples where anything that can start in a very remote locality through the right method of expansion or spread can actually cause a pandemic. And those are the things that you have to learn, be humble about it, because it's going to happen and it's going to happen again if we're not careful and learn our lesson.
Yeah. Dr. Lozzi, did you in your wildest dreams as an infectious disease expert expect something to spread so quickly and would be so deadly, very obviously common or equal to the Spanish flu?
Yeah, I think that it's a sort of yes and no. I mean, I was sort of lucky in that where I did my fellowship was the Center of Infectious Disease Research and Preparedness, CIDRAP, which is run by Dr. Michael Osterholm, who actually sat on a previous president's infectious disease preparedness. And so we ran tabletop drills probably once a year on this. And so in the back of my head, I knew it was possible. I think one of the biggest things, and Dr. Mesa can attest to this, is that in the beginning, the data that we had was not correct. What we were getting out of China was wrong data. It was incorrect. Well, quickly, once we realized what was happening, I think from an ID standpoint and a clinical standpoint, we were already telling people in April that they should really cancel any major plans they had for the rest of the year because this would be an issue. What we didn't expect is what happened in November and December.
Dr. Lozzi, both you and I contracted this virus. Not at the same time, but we both contracted it. Did it give you a unique perspective as to how debilitating something like this can be?
I think what it gave me a unique perspective on is how you can attempt to be diligent, you can attempt to wear a mask and then still get it, right? And so I think that was what sort of surprised me. And as you know, I mean, I got it literally the day before I was going to get my COVID vaccine. But I think for me, as I'm still undergoing some of the long COVID symptoms, new onset arthritis in my wrist post-COVID, it's amazing to me that even if you don't unfortunately get sick and die, there's so many things that it can cause in terms of fatigue and insomnia and joint pain and heart problems that we're going to be dealing with this for years to come.
Yeah. Dr. Mesa, do you believe that we did enough? I mean, obviously you were front and center, both of you, Dr. Lozzi and Dr. Mesa, you were both front and center in front of the camera, telling folks exactly what they needed to do to try to prevent from getting this. Did we do enough, and what do you think we would do differently?
Well, it's always, this hindsight is always 2020, right?
And
so we always know what we did wrong and we could have done better. The reality of it is that there were so many models that predicted different outcomes that it was very difficult to find the one that really helped us in the field on the day-to-day operations. And I think that was the major limiting factor, because when you don't have that accurate information available to you, the action plans tend to be less concrete, less likely to be successful. And I think that partially that happened. I think that many of the precautions that were taken were effective. And I think that we see in some way, some response of that effort now. But back then, I think that we acted with a more aggressive and more cautious way, of course, it could have been a different outcome, even though we know that right now, the most important factor, in addition to everything that we have done, has been the vaccine for the better of what's happening with this pandemic. I don't know what would have happened without the vaccine. I tend to believe that that's something that we're seeing now and a consequence of all the things that we have learned along the way. So multiple combinations. Could we done better? Of course, there's always a room for improvement, but that's always something that happens, and we just have to learn from our lessons.
Dr. Alozzi, what do you think we should have done differently? Should we have alerted people sooner? Should we have shut down sooner? What should we have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, again, the postmortem of this pandemic will be written 5-10 years from now, and people will take pot shots. I think that if we were to identify two things that we probably didn't do early enough or intensively enough, it was around masking. I mean, we didn't have the information around masking. We told people not to use masks. And I think from a sort of societal standpoint, we got into this discourse around mask, no mask, right? It became a political stand instead of a science stand. And I think that's what drove the majority of the spread that we could have really prevented. And so I think that's really the tragedy of this.
Gentlemen, we're going to take another quick break. You're watching ABC-7 Extra Sunday edition. Still ahead, I'll ask my guests what it is that we've learned that can be used to fight future outbreaks. We'll be back.
Now more than ever, home is our whole world. So if you're looking for a new space of your own, TFCU wants to help you find the mortgage loan that fits your budget and lifestyle. Start at tfcu.coop to view our competitive rates. If you're a first-time home buyer, we'll help guide you through every step of the process. And for your comfort and safety, we offer a convenient online mortgage loan application. Find your forever home with a mortgage loan from TFCU.
Getting a tax refund this year? Want to make it go further? Take it to Household Furniture, where you'll find unbeatable prices on everything in our showroom. Plus, instant savings of up to $1,000. Or no interest financing for up to 5 years. Get this 7-piece dinette for just $9.99. This sofa for $3.99. And this 6-piece bedroom for just $15.99. The tax refund sale going on now at Household Furniture.
Spring is here, and at El Paso Electric, savings are in full bloom. It's your online destination for instant rebates on energy-saving products. Save a trip to the store with our Save and Easy ship-to-home options. You can even enroll in money-saving home services, like the Energy Wise Savings Program. Enroll and get $25. You're just a few clicks away from great deals on great products. With the EP Electric Marketplace, start saving today.
The Filet-O-Fish is completed with a half slice of cheese right on the bottom bun. One may ask, is its bun half empty or half full? We'd say the latter.
Enjoy even more with the deliciousness of 2 irresistible Filet-O-Fish sandwiches for only $6. Only at McDonald's.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Welcome back to ABC-7 Extra, and also welcome back Dr. Armando Mesa, Chief of Infectious Diseases at Texas Tech Physicians of El Paso, and Dr. Ogechika Alozzi, who has been a frequent guest on ABC-7 Extra. He, too, is an infectious disease expert and sits on the Governor's Task Force for Infectious Disease Preparedness. Dr. Alozzi, I'll start with you. What is it that you think that we have learned that we can now implement moving forward should something like this or similar ever happen again?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've learned is that messaging is critical. We had a multiple level failure in messaging in 2020 at all levels. And the messaging led to the discord around masking and around close, not close. I think as we go forward and as funding gets pumped into various agencies that are going to be driving how we do surveillance, how we look at the science, and how we look at vaccines and therapeutics, I think we'll see that we'll be more prepared from a sort of early warning system going forward. And I think that's a huge piece of it.
That's a good point that Dr. Alozzi brought up, Dr. Mesa. The early warning system, how can we modify it? How can that change on an international level, on a national level, and on a local level?
Well, to be able to have an effective communication tool, you need to have all your resources available. You need to have what we call the weakest link fixed. So if the weakest link of this process, which is a multi-step process of communicating information and taking action, is properly addressed, and that's going to require funding from the federal government, from the state government, from the local government on the resources to do that, I think that we can learn that every key component of that chain is going to be fully supported to be able to be successful. And it is getting more complicated to do that because we actually, as I said, and we mentioned in the past, we felt very comfortable that we had handled infectious diseases without any problem, that there was nothing else that we had to worry about that will cause this. So the lesson learned, and hopefully the improvement, is to address infectious diseases as a serious condition to our survival and take those steps that will definitely help the future.
This question is for both of you, and I'll start with you, Dr. Mesa. At a physiological level, is there anything that we as humans can do to improve combating infectious diseases like these?
The infectious diseases world is very particular. Someone was asking in the past about whether we should be able to inherit some kind of protection. And the fact of the matter is that when we are born, we have some protection, but we don't inherit a lot of it genetically to protect from new infections. So anytime a new infection comes, we are susceptible, as we showed with the pandemic. So how is it that we are going to be able to fight it back best we can? Well, good health. If you are in best shape possible, as far as your medical conditions and your prevention strategies, you should be able to weather the storm best than other people. So the general principles apply for any other medical condition, but particularly for infections. The healthier you are when you get exposed, the better the outcome is going to be. And that's going to require a lot of public health efforts. And I hope that that will be actually the next step in our society to improve our outcomes
Dr.
for
Alozzi?
these diseases.
Dr. Alozzi?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Dr. Mesa. I think what we've learned is that the healthier you are, and sometimes the younger you are, that's where your body goes. And so, again, hard to say because who knows what the next pandemic will be. It may have a different spike protein that makes younger people sicker. We've seen that in the past with viruses. And so I think we're just going to have to ensure that people understand that health is wealth and that public health is important to the sort of ability of a society to grow.
We've come to the point now, gentlemen, doctors, where we now have a vaccine. Dr. Mesa, did you believe that we would ever have a vaccine so quickly?
If I say yes, you're going to say that I'm probably lying, but actually I want to say yes. And I'll tell you why. I've been following, completely unrelated, the issue of sequencing, genetic sequencing, and I've been impressed how quickly we can now generate these viruses DNA and find out about it. So with that piece of information, I felt confident that it could be done. Now, what I was surprised, to be honest with you, is the amount of money and resources that the companies were willing to put together to get the vaccine in that time period. I knew about the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials, and I knew how lengthy that process will be. So that is my surprise, how quickly the administrative process of developing a vaccine went through and how successful it was at the end.
Dr. Alozzi?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. I think one thing people have to remember is this: 181 candidates started out this journey, and as of today, we have 8. And so the science existed, but we got lucky at the end of the day. We also got good using Operation Warp Speed. The ability to stack and run trials in parallel was the critical piece that allowed us to have a vaccine by December of 2020. If they had to go, I said in parallel, if they had to go one after another, waiting for that money, we would have been at the 2 or 3 year mark. And so I think kind of focusing in on vaccines, Sal, I think that has to be the message. Like I said, we failed historically at messaging COVID. We can't fail on the messaging around the vaccines, or else we're going to be that community that has endemic COVID, and we don't want to be that.
Yeah. Do you think everything that you just mentioned in reference to how fast we got the vaccines and all the science behind it will help us going into the future, should something like this ever happen again? Dr. Mesa?
Absolutely.
Dr. Alozzi?
Oh, sorry, Dr.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Alozzi.
I was just about to say, absolutely. I think the collaborative science that multiple companies have come together with is an amazing feat. The fact that they've been able to use mRNA, they're now trying to look to see whether they can create a vaccine for malaria, right? We're going to see this over and over again in cancer. And so the energy and the dynamism that went into this in 2020 is going to reap a host of benefits over the next decade.
And MNRA also produced some Nobel Prize winners in medicine. Your final thoughts, Dr. Mesa?
Well, I agree. The technology that we are developing now is going to be very useful for many other applications. And the science in genetics for cancer, for example, is going to help with infectious diseases. The technology of CRISPR, the genetic editing, things like that, are kind of beginning to show how useful they can be in these situations. So I'm very optimistic that in addition to lessening a public health lesson, we're going to have the technology to help that out. But again, things need to be kept in a way where every single step of the process is addressed and properly fitted. PPE is a good example. If you don't have all the PPE that you need, doesn't matter how much technology you have available, you still have a weak link that you need to fix. If you don't do that, then we're going to get another pandemic and we're going to have the same issues.
Dr. Mesa, Dr. Alozzi, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us and informing our public.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President Joe Biden said during his first primetime national address to the public, he hopes we can vaccinate enough people that Americans can gather in small groups to celebrate the 4th of July. Until then, we must continue protecting ourselves and each other. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Saul Saenz, and this has been ABC-7 Extra Sunday Edition. Good night y buenas noches.